While the God's Knights sit in the shadows, awaiting their chance to enact their ploy to kidnap the children of Elbaf, there is still yet another threat to the safety of this island, sitting at the base of its very own Atom Tree.
And thanks to the assistance of Luffy and his crew, the residents of Elbaf may be soon facing a war on not one but two different fronts. But before we reveal anything too significant, we're going to start at the very beginning of this chapter with the cover series.
And we get a continuation of the situation from last week's installment of Who's Who threatening Ulti and Page One's lives, but we also do get a clear look at the situation with both these Devil Fruit users also being shackled in Sea Stone shackles, which is preventing them from transforming and fighting back in any way.
Yeah, and while she's obviously just dying to protect her brother and filled with rage, she ultimately can't do anything and is just helpless here. And it's going to definitely take the assistance of Yamato's company if they're going to actually see another day in Wano, which hopefully will give them something more to do other than just observe as they have been in the last however many chapters of this cover series.
I mean, the most action Yamato's had is chasing off a kidnapper, so we need to see something more significant, and hopefully we'll get that in the next installment.
Yeah.
But let's look at the chapter itself, starting with the title being Older Women. So a bit of a variation from Oda's usual naming scheme he's been using in Elbaf of more direct and simplistic naming types, but instead it seems to actually kind of be previewing a bit of a small reference from the chapter that's not super important to the overall narrative, at least on the surface level.
Yeah, it could be a joke, or it could be alluding to something deeper that we're just not yet aware of, but we really have to wait to find out more as the story continues. So we'll move into the first page, where we open focusing on Nami in the middle of a rant about the absurdity that she had to travel and traverse West Castle all afternoon without the gratification of a single piece of treasure.
And it might be a bit of a minor inconvenience to most people, but it is kind of understandable frustration because she's greedy for one thing, but she did spend all day searching through this castle for nothing. It just might be a bit more appropriate not in the presence of the two guards that were trying to guard all that treasure.
Yeah, because they're still already breaking a lot of rules, and here she is just openly telling them, like, hey, we were trying to ransack this place. We were trying to take from here. And Roach's trying to, calm her down and not reveal too much, but she just keeps on going.
Yeah, no, he has very little control in this situation, but it is nice to see that they're making an effort to get these two giants some actual medical attention. And Nami really doesn't seem to care at all, because it doesn't seem like they're going to remember much of what they're hearing right now anyway.
That's a good point. But we also briefly cut away from that group to witness Ripley and Franky's journey through the Atom Tree continue, as she summarizes that each individual branch of this great tree has its own history and community that resides on top of it. But their place of residence comes with a mighty cost.
And that cost is very evident, as Franky does point out, a branch that seems to stand out, that seemingly has been artificially severed from the rest of the tree. And Ripley goes on to explain that this used to be the home of the Haugen village, which was struck by lightning one day, causing the entire thing to catch fire, and in order to save the rest of the tree, they had to cut it off, with the village included.
Yeah, and this kind of makes Franky realize that not even the great Atom Wood is immune to the test of time, to which Ripley then tells him that those are Elbaf's greatest weaknesses, fire and lightning.
And aside from this kind of being the case for most things, because fire and lightning are very destructive.
Yeah, pretty destructive things.
There's no other, check-in with this group for the rest of the chapter, which very much seems to indicate that this is just Oda giving a very obvious allusion to there's going to be a big problem with fire or lightning, or both, in the future of this arc. So it could be that we might just spend the rest of this arc trying to get out of a burning tree, and that could be the chaos that is the rest of Elbaf.
Yeah, and it's also quite a precursor to what ends up happening at the end of this chapter. But after this brief ominous premonition, we do return to the Western Village, as Nami is returning to the party, where she's greeted by a incredibly drunk Usopp.
We don't see him drinking too often, but it is kind of funny. And
he's got to keep up with the giants.
Yeah, he's trying. He's comfortable. This is part of his dream, so he's celebrating. But he is still aware enough to ask where Luffy and Zoro are, before being very easily convinced by Nami that they're probably just exploring.
They're just off doing their thing.
But now that Usopp sees she's returned, he does try to introduce Nami to Ja Rule by saying, this is our genius navigator. And Ja Rule, having a set of eyes, notes that Nami is quite a beauty. But Usopp, in his drunken stupor, continues to ask, is she your type, man? Is this what you're interested in? But Ja Rule's got a much sicker sense of humor than that.
Yeah, it says that he's into older women, which calls back to the titled name. And seems like just kind of a funny, offhanded joke. Because they're like, you're the oldest person in the world. There are no older women.
But it could, in a way, also allude to maybe somebody Ja Rule fell in love with that's older than him, that got him into older women, or somebody that might still be alive, we just don't know. I have seen some people think it might be Eam, because there's theories that Eam's a woman who might be alive this whole time.
Oh, that'd be crazy.
Okay. But we would have to see, because there's very little we know about that character. However, the irony of that statement is not lost on Usopp, even in his state, and after hearing this, jumps into the air, smacks the sword in Ja Rule's head, and declares how ridiculous this is, considering that he is the oldest living giant. And while it's a funny scene and it's played off for gags, it is kind of interesting that even somebody so small like Usopp touching the sword causes immense tremors of pain for Ja Rule. So,
I mean, it is a sword stuck in his head.
Absolutely. I mean, as much as he likes to deny that it saved him with his helmet, but I do think it also points out that it might cause a lot of issues if this is removed. Like, he goes on to joke on the next page, as he can't really control himself at this point. So he continues talking about the sword and who wants to try pulling out the sword like Excalibur. And Dory and other giants just have to step in and are like, dude, you're gonna kill him.
Yeah, he'll die. Don't do it.
So luckily they are there to intervene. But Usopp is just so drunk at this point. He's kind of making an ass of himself. And even Brooke points this out, but he is in no better situation to be pointing fingers.
Yeah. They're all, clearly, if they stuck with the Giants, they're as drunk, if not more drunk, than the Giants.
They're definitely fitting right into the crowd. And while this is just a ridiculous scene, it doesn't seem like Nami really holds this against her crewmates, as she does remember this is Usopp and Luffy's dream, and she was actually the one kind of present with Usopp when he fell in love with the idea of giants, as she was with him when Broggy captured the two of them initially. So she's seen how much this has been important to them for all of this time. And I think it's nice that she has that bit of insight, that she's just letting them appreciate it.
Yeah, she's like, you know what, I'm not going to do anything, just going to sit here next to Jinbei and, let him live out that dream. And we then cut to elsewhere in the same party, where Sanji suddenly has an odd sensation and notes the absence of Gerd from the gathering. And while it's impressive that he's able to so keenly pick up on this, it's kind of crazy that he even let her out of his sight in the first place, being who he is and how attractive he finds her. But at least he was able to figure it out at this point.
And it's not as though she stays missing for long, as shortly after her absence is noted on that page, we take the next page to show a different part of Western Village, away from the gathering, where Gerd is currently tending to the guards that Road brought back to her for care. However, Gerd notes that these are some serious injuries, and these guards are no joke, so something had to have happened, and Road is clearly holding something back from her. So she has to figure out how they ended up in this state.
Yeah, I mean, he's trying to, just wave it off as, we were just exploring, and I happened to come across this. Not sure what happened. Then he kind of just starts thinking to himself, but Gerd isn't dumb. She can see right through this veil and knows that he's hiding more information from her.
She does threaten at first that she's like, fine, if you won't tell me, I'll ask the guards themselves. And he's like, oh, no.
They need to rest.
Yeah, they're hurt. And she even continues to do the same thing on the next page as she goes, well, then I at least have to tell Elder Ja Rule because he needs to know about this. No, he's having fun at the party. You can't ruin his fun. That would be horrible. Why would you do that? But each of these attempts to cover his tracks is very clearly just putting the suspicion further and further onto Road, as Gerd is clearly seeing through all these really poor attempts. And as you said, he just begins to think to himself, he's like, how do I get out of this without being a co-conspirator?
I like how in the background you can see her like, all right.
She's sick of it. She'd lost her patience, and she's waiting for an honest response, and she just takes the blunt side of her battle axe and beats him in the back of the head and demands answers at this point. But that is all we see from that scene. But you can get a good idea that he's not going to hold on much longer.
That's about the final straw.
And with little time now before Gerd and the rest of the giant warrior pirates are made aware of their plans to free Loki, we do cut away to see Luffy and Zoro arrive in the lower realm to the spot where Loki is chained up, only to discover the accursed prince in his weak and heavily injured state due to the God's Knights.
Yeah, and once Luffy's able to see Loki's breath, confirm that he's at least holding on to life, even if barely, he tries to take action and immediately free him, but's held back both by Zoro's reservations and the sea stone shackles themselves that are already holding Loki down.
Yeah, he immediately weakens his own self and can't really even hold up the key. And Zoro is keen enough to observe that all of these ferocious-looking animals around the area have also been vanquished, so there's something seriously powerful that attacked Loki and all of these other beasts, which just leads him to wonder who could have even pulled this off from around the island.
Yeah, and the tensions between Luffy and Zoro very quickly reach a boiling point, as Luffy's got compassion for this dying man, and Zoro, on the opposite hand, is just not going to trust him. Doesn't care, he has a poor reputation, he's huge, and he compares him to oars. He's as big as oars. How can we just be this nonchalant about it?
Yeah, I love the counterbalance that the two of them always have, kind of balancing each other out. But this is a super serious situation. You can't just free a skyscraper of a person and not expect there to be consequences. So Zoro's kind of in the right in that regard.
Yeah, but meanwhile, Luffy just cares about, we need to save his life.
Yeah, it's the different sides of the same coin in a certain way. But before they can make any official decision, Zoro asks that Luffy allow him to at least test a suspicion before proceeding to just, like, fully sidekick Loki right in his stab wounds.
Sanji kick him.
Just to see if they're truly valid.
Which they are. Hilarious. And Luffy's like, what are you doing?
Loki, oh, this poor guy. I mean, he might be evil, but he is getting tortured.
Yeah.
And he demonstrates just how real his pain is as he just begins to wail in response to this attack. A wail that's so loud and strong that it just rings throughout the lower realm for him to cry and scream again. Most of what we've seen of the lower realm is just Loki getting assaulted and screaming.
Yeah. But having conducted his own test, Zoro now finally agrees to release Loki while keeping at least an ankle cuff on, but admits that they do need to fetch a doctor from the village if they're going to keep him alive.
Luffy does initially suggest Chopper because that's the doctor they know the best, but Zoro's being very astute. I'm going to keep a precautionary measure with the ankle on, and you should definitely go to the village because they're closer. So there's probably a doctor at the party.
Yeah, and honestly, a giant doctor probably knows how to treat a giant better than little old Chopper's
Absolutely.
going to.
It's like a vet.
Yeah.
You take a human to a vet. However, Zoro, being aware of these consequences, also makes him aware of the fact that them asking for help is going to immediately alert them to what they've done and let them know that they are traitors that freed Loki. But Luffy is so indifferent to this, and he's just thinking about helping this man.
Yeah, well, and getting some food. He does want some meat.
Oh, I think it's a way of him being like, meat helps me always heal, so he probably needs meat to heal, because he's looking rough. So it's a bit of like that sympathy that he typically has, but Zoro does immediately suggest a more immediate solutions, like all these animals nearby are defeated, so like we could just eat them.
Yeah, and honestly, shout out to Luffy, always being the friend of beasts, because he's like, no, we can't eat them. They're his friends. They're now my friends. Like, I'm not going to eat them anymore because we become friends.
Yeah. I mean, he loves to eat, but it seems like any animal he connects with his Conqueror's Haki...
They're now off the table.
He even says it himself, my friends are off the menu, which is a fun way of putting it, but, like, he has made that genuine connection with them. And before they can make any official course of action to get a doctor or get any meat or anything like this, Luffy just looks up to the sky and sees what looks like just a falling star or like some ship falling from the sky.
Yeah, and we zoom in, and it is in fact a ship with Hajrudin and company, who quickly took the skyship to stop Loki's release the moment that they heard, even at the risk of their own demise, as the island clouds are not able to form.
Yeah, below a certain height, and we found this out in Skypiea, those island clouds cannot exist. They thought they might have gotten a little bit closer than they did, but they were fully aware this is going to be a crash landing. And it seems like Hajrudin even admits, he's like, oh, okay, I think I just killed us.
Yeah, I should have probably thought this through a bit more.
And he apologizes to his crew who are like, hey, man, yeah, it was a bad choice, but, like, we get it. Loki sucks, so we were on board with it. So it's like, these people were willing to die to have a chance to stop Loki. It is not making his character being painted a whole lot better light. But as they are about to crash to their very own demise, Luffy just inflates himself. We've seen his balloon form many times, but this one has to be big enough to handle a crashing giant ship and crew of giants. And obviously, because of the force they're coming in with, it sends it flying, but at a much slower trajectory than them just crashing into the earth.
Yeah, at least still keeps it intact and everyone is able to walk away, which that's the most important part here.
They do sustain some injuries, as you can see on the side of the page, like Hajrudin's missing a tooth. But as they do approach him to thank him for saving their lives from what would have been pretty much nearly instant death, Hajrudin doesn't waste a lot of time and bursts into a rant about just how truly despicable and awful and deceiving his brother is. He not only recounts the fact that he's just so deceitful, such a trickster, always lying to use people to his advantage.
Yeah, he's like, even when he compliments you, it's a lie.
Yeah.
It's for some ulterior motive.
He tells him all of these things that they've heard multiple times about Loki before, but he goes a step further and he's like, it's not just hearsay for me. I grew up with him.
Yeah, this is
I
my
know
brother.
him.
Yeah.
We all know him. So please just listen to us and don't free this guy.
But as Zoro kind of just tells him bluntly, bit too late for that. Like, sorry, it's already happened.
Yeah.
And, I mean, they turn, and he doesn't seem so injured anymore.
No, on to the final page. Now that Loki is finally freed from his imprisonment, he raises to his feet, towering higher and higher into the sky. And Zoro pointed out that he is bigger than even most giants, but this is one of the most, intimidating presences we've seen in the story for introduction.
This man has aura.
It's like, it reminds me of when Kaido landed from the Sky Island and towered above these other pirates, but he is so much bigger than that. It's just such a massive scale that you can't not just sit there and be impressed as he turns Luffy into this tiny ant before him. And oh my god, the rest of this crew is just rightfully in horror, as now the scourge of their country is standing before them free, aside from a ankle shackle that Zoro kept on him.
And all he's ever said is, when I get free, I'm laying waste to this land. I'm going to end the world.
Luckily, Hajrudin, not being intimidated by the moment, does waste no time yelling at his brother to stop what he's doing, as he sees him reaching back behind him for his axe, telling him to put Ragnir down before he does anything rash. And the kanji that we get for that translation of Ragnir means Iron Thunder. So, not necessarily the god of lightning like Thor, but he has a big hammer and it go boom.
Yeah, and I'm doubting that it just makes the noise of thunder. I mean, thunder and lightning kind of go hand in hand.
And we learned just in this chapter how devastating lightning would be to this country, so we better hope to God that we have misconstrued this man's character and he's just been misunderstood. Because if he decides he wants to just go on a rampage now, it's going to be so much more difficult to get out of this country alive with everybody.
Even if there is more to him than he's just simply evil, even if there is more backstory, I feel like at least at first, he is going to do a little damage here.
It really is a matter of who is he more pissed at. Does he want to attack the giants who imprisoned him? Does he want to, attack Zoro because he kicked him in his wound? Or does he want to find the guy that stabbed him?
Yeah.
He's pissed.
He's got a list. He's got a list.
He's rightfully pissed for a lot of stuff, but it's really a matter of, is he reasonable enough to know when to strike and who pissed him off the most? So we are going to have to wait and see what direction that goes in next, and we don't have to wait long as we surprisingly, again, have no break next week.
Hey man, Oda's doing his job. He's keeping us going.
He's keeping the content flowing, and we're going to have to do the same for you guys, so leave a comment down below. What do you think he's going to do? I mean, this is the first time this guy's been free in 6 years. So what do you think is going to be the first thing he does now? Leave a comment down below letting us know what you think. Like the video if you enjoyed the review. Subscribe to join our growing pirate fleet. And as always, be crew.